Former cricketer Azeem Rafiq this morning stood before politicians ready to give his honest and powerful testimony about the racist treatment he says he was forced to endure during his time playing for Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Revelations that could change the entire fabric of the sport forever.
I felt isolated, humiliated at times, constant use of the word. In 2017 pre-season tour, we were in a place and Gary Balance walks over and goes, "Why are you talking to him? You know he's a or he's not a sheikh, he's got no oil." And this happened in front of teammates, it happened in front of coaching staff.
The abuse came at a time when Rafiq was dealing with the loss of his unborn child.
End of 2017, we had a really difficult pregnancy. And through that time, the treatment that I received from some of the club officials was inhuman. They weren't really bothered about the fact that I was at training one day and I get a phone call to say there's no heartbeat. Sorry.
And in a brutally invasive example of how bad the culture he claims has been for years, he revealed this.
My first instance of drinking, I actually got pinned down at my local cricket club, and red wine got poured down my throat.
How old were you?
15.
15, you're a Muslim, 15.
15-year-old, I got literally down my throat. The player played for Yorkshire.
He also claims all players who were black or Asian were given the same name.
Kevin was something Gary used to describe everyone of colour in a very derogatory manner. Gary and Alex Hales at the time got really close to each other when they played for England together. Alex went on to name his dog Kevin because it was black.
And of the current England captain, Rafiq wanted to make it clear he never heard Joe Root use racist language, but didn't call it out either when it was heard.
Root is a good man. He's never engaged in racist language. I found it hurtful because Rooty was not only Gary's housemate, Rooty was involved before he started playing for England. He was involved in a lot of them socialising nights out where I'd been called the but again, it just shows, and he might not remember it, but it just shows how normal it was in that environment, in that institution, that even a good man like him doesn't see it for what it is.
The England and Wales Cricket Board and Professional Cricketers Association have come under huge criticism for their lack of care.
And I can only apologise to Azeem Rafiq and his family for the horrendous time he has gone through, not just when it happened, but subsequently as well. But I want to leave you in no doubt that the game is absolutely filled with the determination to resolve the issue of race in cricket.
Lord Patel, new chair of Yorkshire, repeated their apology to Rafiq and said the club deserved the criticism it received and promised action. But whilst the spotlight today was on Rafiq, he says he's motivated to improve the game for the next generation.
All I've ever wanted is some sort of acceptance, an apology, and let's work together to make sure it doesn't happen to my kids and I can let my kids go and play cricket.
Well, with me to discuss this shameful day for cricket are former English international cricketer Monty Panesar, Taj Butt, who's secretary of a grassroots cricket club in Yorkshire, and journalist and commentator Mihir Bose. Monty Panesar first. It is a shameful day, isn't it, for cricket and indeed Britain as a whole, really?
Yeah, I like listening to Azeem Rafiq's, testimony. It was, heartbreaking and jaw-dropping, to see the struggle and the pain he must have gone through as a professional, cricketer. But you also got to admire, his fearlessness and his complete determination to actually share his experiences, to the wider audiences, to government, and take on, the governing body.
Taj, but these allegations were so horrific and so recent. Were you shocked by the extent of what he revealed?
Sadly, no, because, again, most of the people of colour who've been involved in the game of cricket, most of us actually would have gone through some sort of experience like that, whether it's on the field of cricket or whether it's in the place of employment where we are a minority, sadly. we have to go through these sort of things, and it didn't really come as a surprise at all.
Well, Mihir Bose, I mean, that's a terrible reflection, isn't it, on the sport? But how widespread is this problem of racism? Rafiq said it was, it was at other clubs too, to a great extent. Mihir Bose, are you hearing me?
Yes, certainly, yeah.
How widespread do you think this problem is?
I think it's quite widespread. I think there is a denial that it takes place. I think the administrators who run the game, who are mainly white and male, they believe that they are living in a post-racial world. And if they find allegations of this nature, they tend to think that the person making it is playing the victimhood card. What has happened, and Rafiq, of course, was very graphic and very harrowing, as you describe it. What has happened is that this generation, and Rafiq is in that sense the leader of this generation, have come out to speak about it. I've been covering sport for nearly half a century, and you'd hear cricketers in the 70s and 80s and 90s talk about it, but they didn't want to come public. Cricket, after all, is a game of 11 people. They wanted to be part of the dressing room. They already felt they were outsiders. To come out would ruin their careers. Now, maybe a new generation will come out and talk about it. And cricket has been very good at concealing its nature and pretending that the dark secrets don't exist, much better than many other games. Certainly much better than football.
Monty Panesar, let me put that to you, because it was really interesting hearing Rafiq say that he was initially in denial about racism that was aimed at him. Is that a common experience, do you think?
Well, I think this is something, the ECB and the rest of the counties will need to learn, and they want more people coming out to talk about their experiences of racism that they probably, at the time probably felt that they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be seen as a troublemaker within the club or the dressing room environment. And this is the opportunity now to talk about it. So the game itself can get a deeper understanding, of how far discrimination exists in cricket. And they've got until, I think,
I just wonder, in that spirit, have you ever been called the P word or a racial slur of a similar nature and thought, well, I don't want to rock the boat, so I'm not going to say anything?
I've never been, no one's ever said the P word to me, for all the teams that I played for and at England level. And for me, I was just, completely, let's say, absorbed in just performing really well. And some of the other conversations, I was lucky that maybe I didn't have to witness it, the horrific stuff that Azeem had to. So, he's willing to work with the ECB and Yorkshire County Cricket Club. So, that must be quite, refreshing for them to hear. But, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. And, they need a deeper understanding needs to be, known about, what kind of racism does exist and discrimination, in the game. And we've already seen MCC, they've teamed up with Show Racism, the Red Card, because they want their staff members to get firmer education on microaggression, offensive language, and how to deal with the, racism that does probably exist in our society.
Taj, but Azeem Rafiq said that he doesn't want his own son anywhere near cricket. What impact will this have? And will a generation of South Asian kids effectively shun the game, do you think?
Well, I think within the South Asian community, you're not going to put kids off on playing the game of cricket, because we are very passionate about the game, and the interest in the game has never been higher. Running as a club, and we're getting more and more kids wanting to play cricket. So that's never going to stop. But obviously, what's happened in terms of what's actually coming out, this is something that is actually quite common knowledge at grassroots levels, because we've had parents, whose sons and daughters have actually gone through that process, and they've actually found it's very difficult and disheartening that our kids have to be twice as good as the nearest white kid in order to make progress. So this is something that's not something that just happened now. It's been around at the grassroots levels. So despite that, it's clubs like ours, we're going to make sure that they get all the opportunities that they deserve.
Mihir Bose, I wonder how much of a watershed moment you think this is. Is it, for example, the moment that white cricketers stand up and call out racism in the way that never happened for Rafiq?
Well, I have my doubts how much of a watershed moment it will be. Yes, we have had the former chairman of Yorkshire admit that Yorkshire is institutionally racist. Lord Patel, we heard, said that this is cricket's equivalent of what the Stephen Lawrence murder and what happened to the Metropolitan Police. But I think cricket as a game changes very, very slowly. And if you look at the history of cricket, it changes when something is imposed from the top. It required the government intervention in 1970 to stop the then white South African tour of this country. So if this leads to some sort of regulatory control by the government, because the problem here is you've got to look at the institution. The England-Wales Cricket Board, which runs cricket, did not intervene in the Yorkshire allegations of Rafiq. Why? Because they said, we are the regulators, we must stand back. They are both the organization that runs the game and regulates it. I think we need a different structure to look into this. And unless we get that, I don't think we're going to get changes.
Monty Panesar, change is clearly afoot, but will individuals be held responsible, do you think?
Well, that's something for the ECB, to decide, and also, the committee will produce a report to the government, and in the next 60 days, I think they will review, the conclusions from the hearing and, any recommendations going forward. So that will be interesting to see what the outcome of that will be. And some people have kind of suggested that why wasn't there any, Asian or Black MP, during the hearing? That's something that could be, to suggest for future hearings, to actually have a bit more of a diverse, committee there.
Mihir Bose, Monty Panesar and Taj Butt, thank you all very much for joining me. John.
Well, now the claims of constant racism, bullying and cover-up at Yorkshire Cricket Club go to the very heart of British sport and echo the scandals around racism throughout the establishment, exposed by those who've had the courage to speak out and declare that enough is enough. Aisha Tal has this report.
Just one cricketer's story today, but Azeem Rafiq's harrowing testimony brings racism uncomfortably to the surface once again in this country. And once again, forcing the UK to look deeper into the racism and injustice that still exists, whether in the world of sport, politics or everyday life. Conversations that have been largely ignited since these protests. Even during a pandemic, people were brought out onto the streets, white, black and brown, calling for justice. In Bristol, the toppling of the Colston statue provoking arguments about how colonial history should be talked about and whether the UK is actively being truly honest about its past. The Black Lives Matter protest led to a government-commissioned report on racial equality. It was widely condemned after it questioned whether there is any evidence for structural racism now.
There are disparities. We recognise that, and the disparities that we've looked at are in education, in employment, crime and policing, and health. However, the interesting thing about this report is that it doesn't find those disparities landing in racism. It actually finds them in a lot of other things.
Even after the Black Lives Matter protests, the topic of racial injustice was never far away. Like this summer, the torrent of racist abuse directed at England players. And earlier in the year, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex raised their own allegations of racism, forcing this denial from the heart of their family.
And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir?
No, we're very much not a racist family.
With Azeem Rafiq bringing the issue of racism into the spotlight again, what does it say about where the UK is now?
It is so depressing to hear today because we've heard it all before. We've been here before, and there'll be 24 hours of outrage and then life will continue and then we'll hear it again. And I think that, something really has to change. Last year we had Black Lives Matter. Lots of people talked about we need to do better. And I think, as a society, we need to do better, institutions, sport, but also ourselves as well.
Now that there's been widespread condemnation of the treatment of Azeem Rafiq, just how profound will the change be when it comes to tackling institutional racism this time round?